rhetoric. And my PhD focuses on the rhetoric of the individual in society. So this sort of, this use of Facebook is right in my sort of wheelhouse of things that I've studied and looked at. And I teach at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro, but I teach online. Even before the pandemic, I taught online. I live in Durham with my husband and my 3-year-old son. And yeah, I teach rhetoric and writing composition. We work on rhetoric. I'm teaching a class right now called Rhetoric and Decision Making. I've taught about the uses of education. I've taught about the uses of literature, and a course called Truth, Lies, and Literature. So those questions about truth and about rhetoric and about how people perceive each other in society are sort of what have interested me and driven my work.
Okay, thanks. So maybe somebody along the way have a question about that, that'll be fine. But to get the conversation started, here's where we want to begin. And I want to begin with a personal experience. Over the last, I'm going to say year, I have seen a number of people, friends of mine, who I know are good church-going folk, who have posted something on Facebook. It was almost always a meme. And so it was something, we'll talk about that, but it was something that somebody else had prepared, some text, some information. And I could look at I knew enough about the subject to look at the information and say, the information that you are sharing is incorrect. There were a couple of cases where I was actually sympathetic with the larger argument that they were making or the point that they were driving to, but I knew that the information specifically here was incorrect. And so I pointed that out in the comments on Facebook. I said, hey, I see what you're saying here, but this data is actually not correct. What surprised me was that they didn't seem to care. That they had shared something. I consider Facebook public speech, and so that they had shared something in public that was factually incorrect, and actually portrayed someone in a couple of cases in a bad light. And their response was, well, the overall argument is important enough that my being wrong here is not a big deal. But as a Christian, that bothers me. We ought to be concerned with the truth, wherever the truth leads us, whatever we say, how we communicate. So, my question, Rachel, for you is what was going on there? Why do people do that? Now, noting that perhaps one answer to the question is, I was being rude. That it's kind of obnoxious to just say, hey, you're wrong here. Nobody likes that. But is there something more going on there that you recognize?
Well, a lot of things are going on there. I think one thing that's important to remember is that when we post something like that, even though we feel like what we're posting is facts and the important thing about it is the facts. And when we read somebody else's post and you're responding and you're saying, the facts are what's important here, let's make sure these are true. Actually, I don't think the facts are the most important thing when you're posting. I think the reason, especially in Facebook, so Facebook or other social media, the whole point is to connect with other people. And that, right, we've talked about how that can be really good. And we do that in very positive ways. We connect with people we haven't seen in a long time. It can be a very good thing. But that sort of social function of Facebook means that the most important thing when we post stuff is not really the facts of what we're posting, but it's sort of to signal that we're a good person. And not only that, but to signal that we are part of a good group of people. So those things, I think of, you may have heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Where the sort of base needs that people have to meet are food and shelter. And then you can get up to the more personhood, needs. I think our more important need that has to be met first on Facebook is to feel like we belong to a group of people who is a good group of people. So that's more than the actual facts. We like to think that we're really reasonable people, but there's a lot of evidence out there that shows that our sort of rational, conscious decision-making brain is the slower one, and and the part that sort of thinks through decisions and works through facts and statistics and logic and reason, all that stuff is really good, but it often happens after the fact, after we've made a decision that's more based on emotion, instinct, and belonging to a group. So there, if you call somebody out for not having the facts right, and they're just going to say, well, obviously, you know, I'm a good person and I posted this thing as a good person and part of a good group. So the facts are not the important thing. Just recognize that I'm a good person. So that's the reason that, like, people feel attacked, even if you're, quote, on the same side. You're sort of not catching the important part of it, because you're looking at the facts when that's like higher up on the hierarchy, higher up on the Maslow's hierarchy. Like, that's the thing that you need less, or after the more important thing of belonging to this good group of people, this good tribe. Does that make sense?
It does to me. I see heads nodding. If I'm trying to also monitor the folks, if something seems really, you know, like you just didn't get it, you know, and you want to wave your arms or something, you know,
Yeah, sure.
that would be for Rachel's attention. That would be great too. Rachel, my mind goes in two directions at once here. One is the way that our phones are actually engineered to get us to interact with this device. Our thumbs are quicker than our brains. So, and I think that's what you're getting at. In if you want to say a little bit more about that, that we respond with our thumbs and keep scrolling before we stop and think.
Yeah. So you can think of our decision-making capacity broadly in two sort of categories. One is the conscious slow mind, and the other is the non-conscious fast mind. So obviously, a good example is when we're in danger. We move quickly, we move out of the way. That happens before our conscious slow mind goes through the steps of, I'm standing in the middle of a street. A car is heading toward me. If I don't move, they will hit me. You don't think all those things consciously, you just move out of the way, right? So that's how we're designed. That's how we're made to make non-conscious instinctual decisions quickly. And we often think that those that our non-conscious decisions are actually rational and based on facts, but often the facts come afterwards and justify, instead of coming before and leading to a particular conclusion. So it's very common that we already have a sort of gut instinct, and then we work backwards to rationalize it. So Tim, when you pointed out that some facts didn't matter, the person said, or that some facts weren't right, maybe they already knew that the facts weren't right when they posted it. But I'm guessing, this may be slander, but I'm guessing that they didn't even check, because the facts seemed right. And then afterwards, they wrapped their action by saying, you know, that's not the point. The point is this larger argument that I'm making. So we're often like making decisions quickly and then rationalizing them with facts afterwards.
Right. Yeah. So I'm reminded of the thing that I'm sure I heard my mother say, and I can imagine a number of on the screen say that, you know, before, you know, growing up in an age before there was social media, you know, you've got 2 ears in one mouth and you should use them in that proportion.
Yeah.
The problem is we have 10 fingers. You know, and so we type and we respond with our thumbs and our fingers before we've engaged anything up here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So recognizing that we're using a device and we're having emotions triggered, and goodness knows there's a lot to trigger our emotions these days.
Yeah.
A little event, you know, later on this evening would be, you know, one in that category, the presidential debate, but to stop and think, to remember to stop and think before we get the other, back to the first point, that where my mind went, the other direction was this whole notion of tribalism, which is a topic that I keep running into in my research and how we view ourselves and others. I don't know if you want to expand on our need to be affirmed by our tribe, and you know, how close to the surface that really is. Yeah. Even though we don't really need tribes anymore like we once did.
Yeah, we don't need tribes anymore. And, you know, however you believe it got there, whether it evolved on the plains or it was designed, however you think about that, it's incredibly important in our makeup. It's to feel like we belong to a group. And group cooperation, there are some philosophers and scientists who posit actually that that whole what we call higher level reasoning, the slow conscious thought, there are some people who say that evolved to enable social cooperation. So its primary job, and the evolution, however you want, but its primary job, in other words, is to enable us to justify the actions of people in our tribe. So justify them to ourselves, to make us feel like we're all part of one ethos, like we're all part of one sort of way of looking at the world. And that is so, I mean, you say close to the surface, it's close to the surface and it's really deep. I mean, it's just really there. And it's our need to feel accepted and part of a group. It's again, not conscious often, but it's incredibly important. I did my dissertation actually on the rhetoric of boot camp training in the Marine Corps, because I was just so interested in this idea that people could go from individuals to part of this incredibly tight-knit group where they all defined themselves as part of the Marine Corps. And they do that by having them do physical actions together, act together all the time, doing their rifle drill and all their different actions. So there again is the thumb's faster than the brain, but in this case, it's sort of the bodies moving together, working together, making you feel like you're part of a group. And so on Facebook, we don't have that bodies moving together thing exactly, but we do have posting together. We do have a sense of belonging and community that we get when we post something that we know will get a lot of likes. And there's a lot of research out there about the like thing. And the people who designed Facebook are very open about the fact that like button is a huge part of what keeps people coming back to Facebook, because you want to feel affirmed.
Well, and there's actually some brain chemistry going on there, the dopamine hit, that actually chemically reaffirms values. It makes us feel valued when we go back and we see likes, Yeah. So, I had a thought there and it just left me probably when I let the cat in. So if you have a bingo card at home, you can keep track of how many cats that come in and out the window behind us tonight. And if you're used to our Bible studies, you're used to that. I know the point I was making. It's the theological point that in Christ we're a new creation. And so, you see in the New Testament this new community being formed, that we're actually called out from this one state of relationship with God into another. And so there's another way to talk about how do we define us and them and the other. And it's really there's a huge theological point here that we'll save for later, for another time. So in all of the social media turmoil that has been going on basically throughout this year, that I think has largely been election driven, but is always there at some level, is all of a sudden people were talking about sex trafficking. Back in maybe July, all of a sudden we're talking about sex trafficking now. And we're not talking about sex trafficking on social media. It seems like that has kind of come and gone. And so here's some important points. Sex trafficking is real. There's an organization in Roanoke, Straight Street Ministries, has a separate program called Street Ransom. You can go check them on the web. There's somewhere in the area, there is a safe house where persons who have been victims of sex trafficking, when they're rescued from that, are allowed to go stay there and begin to put their lives back together. So there's no question that this is real. And yet somehow the social media energy seemed inauthentic around that. So Rachel, I'll just kick it over to you. What did you see happening in the social media side of that conversation?
That's classic misdirection. I mean, it's what magicians do when they want you not to pay attention to their sleight of hand trick. So you say it's a lot about the election. I would say also it's about the pandemic and the Black Lives Matter movement.
Yes, absolutely.
And those two issues are both things where, so we've been seeing this movement in politics recently, from you just have your view, I'll have mine, let's agree to disagree, to more of a, my side is morally right and I cannot talk to people who are racist or, you know, whatever the other side is. And on some level, I can understand that. I mean, I'll full disclosure, I lean left politically, and I am a full supporter of the Black Lives Matter movement. And I find a lot of resistance to that Black Lives Matter really problematic ethically. So then the question becomes, do I view people who come back and say all lives matter or blue lives matter, do I view them as morally bankrupt, but still people? You know, do I just disregard their ethics completely? That's a question that each person has to sort of decide, and the church can talk about and decide together. But the problem with social media and this kind of thing is that social media is really reductive. I mean, that's the whole, I mean, you look at a meme or political post, the point of it is to bring everything down to a single point that's like really easy to digest quickly, and it's a trigger, and it makes you feel really positive or really negative right away. But when you have that in this political climate of the people who believe, who are on an opposite end of the spectrum for me are morally wrong, it's sort of a perfect storm for both contempt and fear to separate people. So when you have this these kinds of posts where somebody is not really much of a supporter of the Black Lives Matter movement, and they've been called racist, and somebody doesn't think that COVID-19 is that big of a deal and has been called really like not compassionate and you know, science denier, terrible person for not protecting other people by wearing a mask. So they've really attacked for things that they see themselves as a good person. They've been really attacked for something that seems fine. All of a sudden they need to look around for a cause to espouse that everybody can agree. So I think the rise of this publicity about sex trafficking was like, okay, well, maybe we don't agree about racism and Black Lives Matter or the pandemic and wearing masks, but we can agree that sex trafficking is bad. So it's a way to sort of, you can look at it as virtue signaling, if you've heard that phrase before, or as just, you know, a way to make yourself, like, to show to yourself that you're a good person, by championing this cause that everybody can believe in. And added bonus, it's misdirection. So it takes your attention away from these things that, well, if we talk about these things, you might think I'm a bad person. So let's focus it on this thing where, like,
I'm in the Zoom meeting,
everybody
but
knows.
it's not.
Safe driving.
Sorry.
Yep, we're good.
What?
So let's focus it on this thing about sex trafficking that, like, everybody's in agreement, and we need to really, and that's a real issue that we all need to get on board with dealing with. And then, you know, maybe it gets exaggerated and made bigger than it is. I mean, a lot of the posts had just not factual information about sex trafficking, though sex trafficking is, as Tim said, a very real thing and a real problem. But there was definitely some misinformation about it.
Yeah, that was one of the ones the question that we started with tonight, one of the ones that I responded to. The number that you saw was like, what was it, 800 people the number 800 was always in it. I can't remember the frequency. And it was way too high. There's not that many people being captured into sex trafficking. One statistic, if you did the math, it was like 8 million people per year in the United States. you know, it ended up being like 1% of the population is being captured into sex trafficking, but the media won't tell you about it. That was often a catchphrase that was in there. You won't hear this in the media. I'm like, I guarantee you at our local high school where there has a population of about 1,800 people, if 180 students disappeared, we would be hearing about it, right? You know, but again, it's the stop and think.
Yeah, the media won't tell you about it is another way to signal your own virtue, because you are doing the important, vital work of getting the word out there. That's another sort of hit to your own identity. I mean, a positive for your own
And
identity.
it allows you to characterize a bad guy and other, right? The bad media that's
The
out
media
there
is bad. Yeah.
that won't do their job. So, so the talk about being a good person lends itself, I think, to a conversation about bias.
Yeah.
And so I in my research, the definition of bias that I would offer is giving disproportional weight to an idea or thing.
Mm-hmm.
So we probably think at first glance that bias is something that other people have or the media has, but not us. We might not be right all the time, but we're probably not biased.
Yeah.
But help us out with that.
So one of the videos I show my students early in the semester is incredibly helpful with this analogy. I think probably everybody here has seen optical illusions. Do you know what I'm talking about when I say optical illusion? Like a drawing that you see it one way, it looks like a duck, and one way it looks like a rabbit, or something where
Or a cat walking across the screen, you know.
Yeah. Or you can't tell which way the dancer is turning, or like one line seems longer than another because of the lines around it. This kind of thing. I'm seeing some nodding. People know what I'm talking about. So those are things where, like, if you take the drawing out of context, you can right away go, oh, my brain tricked me. I had this blind spot. I had this handicap that I didn't realize I had. Bias is that way too. Bias is something, I mean, we all have it, full stop, everybody. And we do tend to think of it as something other people have, but we do all have it. And there are different kinds of biases. One of the most common that I've sort of already touched on already is confirmation bias. So with confirmation bias, we're more likely to receive positively information that corresponds with or confirms something we already believe. There's an in-group, out-group thing. This goes along with that idea of being a tribe, where everybody in the group is diverse and has rich inner life and is, everybody's different and that, but everybody over there in that other group is all the same. That's where on a basic level, this is sort of like the optical illusion. People say, all those blank people look the same. Although, you've heard that sort of thing said or quoted or whatever. All those Asian people look the same. All those Black people look the same, or whatever. That's a sort of basic example of that. And we sort of give ourselves and people in our group more right to be different and to be unique than people who are not in our group. That's another example. There's the present moment bias, which is the thing that makes, for example, dieting very difficult. So the pleasure of a thing right now is more important than the negative of a thing in 2 days. So that's the present moment bias. Whatever feels good. And that's bad news along with our fast thumbs issue, because whatever feels good, you keep scrolling, that's more important than, like, in an hour when I stop, I'll feel gross about the hour I just wasted doom scrolling, Yeah.
So the buy now button on Amazon.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's some research that went into that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So these are biases that everybody has, and we have them to different extents, but we do all have them. And they're part of that fast instinctual brain. And bias isn't necessarily bad. They have protected us a lot in various situations. But we need to be aware of them, especially when there's an opportunity that they can hurt other people.
Yeah. Well, and again, another theological comment here would be bias. James talks about if a rich person comes into your church and you treat them one way, but a poor person comes into the church and you treat them a different way, that obviously that's sin. It's a sin of partiality. It's I'm treating someone differently than I would another based on some circumstance of their life. So there's a bias there. So wanting to be aware of that so that we can not do that and not actually harm people in doing it is important for a church. So let's then keeping down the little daisy chain here that we've got going. How does the structure of Google and the internet feed off of our bias? So we know that we probably figured out that we had a little bit of bias, even though we realize other people have it worse, right? So to speak. But we definitely, I think, believe that the information that we gather is biased, or what we're being told is biased. So how does bias? Where do we encounter that in media and social media? Social media particularly, and Google.
Social media for sure. But just with a Google search, we tend to think of a Google search as a service, but it's a product. And the thing that has made it so radically successful, Google, is that it's very good at giving you what you want, and it will give you what you're going to click on. So if you are more likely to click on any particular thing, it's gonna remember that and bring it back to you later. So what that means is that each individual person, even if you're in the same location, if you're in the same room, each person, because of your own search history, will get different results when you type something into Google. So if you type in, and also location. So it's not even, so if you're just opening up a computer for the first time, new IP address, new everything, and they don't have any search information about you, like search history about you specifically, location even matters. So in some parts of the country, when you type in global climate change you'll get, like, the first results will include a hoax. And then in some places it'll be global climate change is going to ruin our planet in the next 50 years. So it's very tailored. And what that means is we can't agree on facts. We can't, as a nation, as a community, if we're not all working from the same set of facts, then we certainly can't decide how to make things better, in any kind of productive or efficient way.
So one simple example of that is Carol and I were talking yesterday about Advent, and we want to prepare some home Advent wreaths, although it won't be round. So we need candles, and we want 1.5-inch votive candles, but we need them in purple, pink, and white. So I'm sitting at my desk searching for candles. Well, now any internet site I go to, I'm seeing ads for candles.
Yeah.
Right. And so we have lots of heads nodding. We already kind of knew that that's how it works. But is that basically the same phenomena that you're talking about? That the searches that we get back to us are based on cookies, things we've engaged on the media. So it lends itself to the idea that sooner or later, if we're not already there, our computer will know us better than we know ourselves.
Yeah, it's our computer. So social media has gotten incredibly predictive. I see somebody brought up The Social Dilemma. That's the documentary, right, on Netflix about, yeah. And I've watched that. So they talk about how there's that saying, if you can't see what the product is, it's you. And someone refined that by saying the product. So we don't pay for Facebook, right? But we get it for free because advertisers sell to us. But it's not just, for free. But it's not just that advertisers sell like in a newspaper. They're selling a prediction of how we will act. So this is even more sort of in depth. It's predictive of our behavior. So it's not just that they knew you wanted candles, is that they can probably figure out what demographic you're in, when you might need, are you going to need diapers for a baby? Here are ads for diapers for a baby. They can, so even if you haven't searched for diapers, they can predict, oh, you've looked at these things, so you're going to have a baby. So there's a lot of data about who corporations think we are and how we will act that is gathered by social media. So you can imagine what that does for our consumption of information. I mean, it becomes an echo chamber. Social media becomes a bubble or an echo chamber where we only get what we want to hear. And then our confirmation bias tells us that that's true. And then we wonder why in the world everyone doesn't believe this true thing that everybody seems to know.
Because we live in a bubble.
Yeah. Yeah.
Rachel, Lynette is an AP statistics teacher, ran into this example of big data. And Lynette's sitting here right across from me, but it was a case where Target sent a coupon for diapers to the home of a teenage girl. And the dad gets this and is really angry. Like, why are you doing this? Yeah. It's because the daughter had done an internet search for a pregnancy test.
Yeah.
And Target bought that data, realized there's a pregnant girl at that house, somebody's pregnant at the house, whatever, and they're going to need diapers. And so in this odd sort of way, Target knew that she was pregnant almost before she did.
Yeah.
Definitely before her dad.
Definitely before her dad did, Lynette says, yes.
Scary.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really
so we see, and it just, on the one hand, I think lots of heads nodding. I think we all kind of had a sense, or we knew enough to realize that this was what was happening. But to think how is our identity being formed as an individual, as a follower of Jesus? When we come into church on Sunday morning, I understand that there are some people whose politically religious views lean right or lean left, and that's fine. I have no ability to keep up with all of the information that is shaping people.
Yeah.
And you can find really good professional stuff out there that is deep, and finding how it's good or bad is not always easy to do. So who's doing the shaping within the church family?
Yeah.
If our lives are to be conformed in the image of Christ. So let me see. So the last thing, Rachel, you and I had talked about is, I think we've worked most of the way down through our notes, but we've prepared a PowerPoint. I'm going to share the screen and just some examples of things that Rachel found through her work, or I found just scrolling through my own Facebook feed. We try to be nonpartisan with this. Some of them are very partisan. You'll see. The point is not to be partisan. The point is to illustrate how social media works. So let me find my mouse. There it is. Share screen. I want to share that, and I want to bring that over. There we go. Okay, so everybody sees that. So this is something I found for fun, but how we're being shaped, what's going on. And if you look at the cab of the truck, you see Facebook, a little Twitter logo, Instagram, some things there. Okay, so this one. Breaking news. This goes back to the sex trafficking. Breaking news, 62 girls just rescued by customs at the port in Delaware, literally locked in a shipping container bound for Europe. The POTUS making America safe for children. So when this scrolled by, this is again another example of one that I shared with a friend, said, hey, hang on a second. I did a Google search. This did not happen. This is literally fake news. What triggered it for me was the last line, the POTUS making America safe for children. And one of my own internal cues is that if there is a polarizing political figure in our society, regardless of party, in a meme like this, it's probably going to be fake. But now, Rachel, when you and I talked about this post, you saw something, at least one other thing that triggered in you, said, yeah, this is why this one's not true.
Oh yeah, just the word literally.
Mm-hmm.
it's a smaller rhetorical cue, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it's false, but that word literally seems very clickbaity to me.
Very clickbait. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So again, a little Google search showed that yes, there are girls being, again, tragically caught up in sex trafficking, or victimized horribly, but this was not a case. This next one is one of my all-time favorites. Is that Jesus or Obi-Wan Kenobi? We might look at that. But my personal favorite is, I bet you won't share this. And I don't know how the rest of you do it, but whenever I see that, I'm like, yes, you are exactly right. Any comments on this one, Rachel?
Oh, no, I'm with you on that.
Yes.
It's a dare. I mean, it's a childhood dare.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so this next one, I want to be careful with this next one. And I want to be clear about what we're going on here. So you have this picture. I've blacked something out. So you have a picture of presumably a mother and of obviously a very sick child that I would assume clearly is presumably a real picture. But what do I have blacked out? If this picture gets shared 1,000 what? Bad grammar, 1,000, she gets the heart transplant she needs for free. This is probably an example of like harvesting. So you get a bunch of people to like it, and then whoever put this ad up, the picture up, changes it later for something else. Would be my guess. All right, there's another one I'm going to follow with. Rachel, you have any comments on that one?
No.
But I see this kind of thing more often than not. It's a very pretty young girl, maybe in a wheelchair, or a dog.
Yeah.
I'm so ugly, nobody likes me, But then there's this one, which is a little snarky. I'm sorry, we only got 957 shares on Facebook. Looks like little Susie won't be getting that new heart now, which I think is just intended to poke fun at all of this stuff. But just to be remembered that I see people liking and sharing these things all the time. And these things are not real, is what I want to point out. Here's another one, not trying to be partisan. If you're a Trump supporter and want to post about Donald Trump on your Facebook, you can do that. For me, it's this notion that Facebook is limiting my reach so that only 7% of my friends can see my posts. That's not correct. Facebook doesn't do that. So, little conspiracy theory trigger there. If you want to share it, but that's not how it is. So, okay. So, Rachel, these next few are yours.
Yeah. This one I find very interesting. First of all, the cross in the American flag. What's the connection? What's that about? Obviously, it seems obvious to me it's a response to the context of NFL players kneeling for the national anthem because of to protest police brutality, and it's saying somehow I am not going to kneel for the national anthem, so I'm going to stand for the national anthem, and that's the way you give respect. The logic of this one is just really muddled. But yeah, it's a sort of odd, it's that displacement thing where if people have said I'm racist or have said I'm, pro police brutality because I think people should stand for the national anthem, then I'm going to show how good a person I am by declaring my Christianity very firmly. That makes sense to you? Do you have any?
It does to me. And Brethren and Mennonite theology would have huge issues with the coloring the cross in an American flag.
Yeah.
There's a room for patriotism and there's a room for, the cross and yeah, that's a kind of a corruption of a lot of things there.
Yeah.
So, okay, next one. Wait a minute. Now let's try it. Oh, I've lost control here somehow.
Yeah, and the background is camo. So
oh yeah, Tom. Yeah, the background is camo. Yes. Okay, here we go. Got the map up.
Yeah, this one's another. I mean, the comment that this came up on my Facebook page, and the comment was something like, "Don't you think we're focusing on the wrong things?" As if the fact that babies die from abortion means that COVID deaths don't matter. It's clearly not a logical connection, but it's that thing of like, somebody has told me that I'm a bad person because I don't care about people dying from COVID deaths. So I'm going to signal that I'm a good person by posting about this other thing that I care deeply about.
As if we can't be upset about more than one thing at a time.
Right. As if that, the correlation there. Yeah. This one uses a very cute little picture of a Black boy. So it says, let me get this straight. Black people who were never actual slaves are fighting white people who were never actual Nazis about removing a statue built by Democrats because Democrats hate their own history and it's all Donald Trump's fault. This one, if you're a Trump supporter, then this probably makes a lot of sense to you just immediately. Like, you're just like, yeah, all these things are true in a very surface level, but it's more complicated than that, right? The Democrat Party that built the statues is not the same Democrat Party as today, and the white people who were never actual they're supporting Nazi ideology, and the Black people were never actual slaves, but they are still feeling the effects of generations of racism. So this is an example of the sort of reductionism that you often get on social media, and that makes it seem so plain and clear, and then you're like contemptuous for the other side.
And using some humor to kind of help communicate the point.
And a super cute little boy.
Yeah, it's a great expression on his face.
It is, yeah. So, so this one's using humor, and I'll read it just so that we're on the same page. It says, and then Jesus drug tested everyone using taxpayer money before deciding if the lazy freeloading masses were worthy enough to receive fish and bread. And it goes on in the same vein, which again, it's humor, right? It's reductive humor, and it's contemptuous of the other side, but it's reducing things that are not necessarily, no, Jesus didn't do these things. But you can argue that there's more complexity to these issues, right? It's not as clear as this very reductive meme is making it seem. But it's an example of humor. This is another one, humor and contempt. Mm-hmm. So conservatives saying we need guns in case we need to overthrow the government, but then, leftists, when leftists have guns, conservatives are like, no, this is bad. You can't have guns. And there is a history of this sort of attitude. A lot of the gun control laws that we have on the books now were a response to the Black Power movement. So there's some truth in this meme, I think. And the way President Trump always brings up Antifa whenever somebody talks about, the white supremacist militias. So that's what this is referring to. But again, it's an oversimplification, and it's contemptuous. It sort of widens the divide between us, and it makes us less able to see each other as human beings. This one, I have to admit, I really find this funny. It is obviously not trying to be serious. So this says, I don't even care anymore. We're coming for your guns. We're going to get your guns pregnant and make them have abortions. We're going to make your guns marry other guns of the same gender and then give both, and then give then both. So spelling mistake there. Healthcare. Try me and find out. So obviously it's the ethos behind this Redder, behind this person who created this meme is like, I'm just done. And I think a lot of people feel that way. I think a lot of people feel like I've made my own decisions about my positions. I'm just not even going to engage with anybody on the other side anymore. And maybe sometimes you need a little relief and a little humor. Like, I can understand the role these can play, but they don't really contribute to civic discourse or belonging in the same church body.
Yeah. If we want to have a real conversation about serious, significant, complicated issues with real people who matter to us, this is not the way to go about it. and so this is kind of just this whole dumbing down of social media impact that has. So the last slide, and then we'll open up for some questions, is one that I prepared. Some strategies for engaging social media. Number one, just engage it less. Spend less time on social media, and when you are on social media, more cat videos. I say that to be cute, funny, but seriously, Facebook has a feature that allows you to snooze someone, and I did that today to somebody. I was just tired of the response in me by this one individual, so I'm not going to see his post for 30 days unless I go looking for them. I just thought, you know what, I care about you, but you're triggering me too much, so I'm just taking a break. It's not anybody in the congregation. I would not do that to someone in our church. So, but in this case, I did. Number two, check for specifics. Does the post or does the news story include details? Does it include the author's name? Does it include the date? Does it include the location? A couple of years ago, there was a news story that would go around every now and then that said John McCain had resigned from the Republican Party. And that thing would crop up every now and then. It had no information. It had no author's name, no date, no nothing. And a friend of mine posted that one time the week that John McCain was in the hospital having brain surgery. And I thought, do you want to think about this one a little bit? So does the post include details? That can be a clue. Number three, assume the worst. Assume what you see. If it's political, especially, just assume that it's fake, that it's incorrect. And if it turns out to be true, then fine. But I often tell people, just assume that it's not true.
I would say, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, here's another thing from my teaching is you can play the doubting game. So there's a time to play the believing game and a time to play the doubting game when you're reading something. And that sort of acknowledges your own biases. So when you read something, just tell yourself, I'm going to out everything I'm reading, and put the burden of proof on it rather than just agreeing if it sort of it confirms your own positions. So put the burden of proof on whatever you're reading. Assume doubt.
Okay. Yeah.
In a situation like this.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Thanks. Fourth, read boring news. Footnotes and embedded links are often very much an indication of careful research. And so read long, boring articles. And finally, on things that interest you. We can't keep up with everything, but we can keep up with one or two things that are of particular interest to us. And so I encourage folks to find one or two of those things and dig in. Okay. We're going to go back to the regular screen, and I'm curious if anybody has any questions. You can unmute yourself, and we'll stay online for a bit here, and we'll just were there things that you raised issues, raised questions? What would you like to add or contribute to our conversation?
I have a question.
Deanna, yes.
Yes. So there are some ladies in my office who were in the same room working. And one of them said something about a certain product, and everybody's phone in that room started offering that product to them. And that's what they told me. And I guess I'm wondering, is that a real thing, or were they pulling my leg, or did they just think that happened, or what? Because that just seems so big brotherish and strange. So, I mean, do phones have that capacity to, listen in and then, send that information to people around you or whatever? Anybody know?
Do you know that, Tim?
I don't know.
I don't think so, but I mean, I would do research about it for sure. I don't think so.
Yeah, I thought it sounded a little strange.
Yeah.
But, there's a lot of technology I don't understand. So,
well, unless there would be something like
Alexa or Siri.
Alexa or Siri or
Yeah.
something heard it, and
I think that's what it was.
Yeah.
I think it was Alexa.
it could be. Then, yeah, I wonder.
Yeah.
I'm not.
I was gonna jump in and share. I've had that happen to me personally. And my phone is set to not have Alexa or Siri acting. It has all the settings for GPS turned off. Like, I don't want my phone knowing where I am, but I was with somebody else whose phone I don't have control over. And we went into a store to go shopping. And then after that, I came home and went on Facebook, and I don't have Facebook on my phone. It's not even connected to my phone. And I was getting ads for the exact store that we had been in together. So somehow that person's phone checked in on Facebook, and there must be still some tracking happening with my phone to know that I was together with this person, because I started getting ads, and I'd never gotten ads from that store before. So,
Wow.
so I do think it does happen.
Okay. So you have
They do
actually
collect a lot of data. Yeah, I would do more research on that. They do collect a lot of data, and I know that Alexa and Siri can do that. But I thought, like, I'm turned off too. Yeah, I
That's
don't.
fascinating. Okay, thank you.
All right. Anyone else?
I'm curious a little bit about, like, on Facebook or whatever social media site, we likely have different friend groups from different times of our lives. Like, I have my high school friends, Rachel's my college friend, or other college friends on there. And then I've lived in other places, so I have other circles. And I like that because it keeps me in touch with a lot of people that have a lot of different views. But at the same time, then we have all these different views that are combating, and it's very hard to process right now. And I guess now I've lost track of what my question is, but sort of, we're trying to, Rachel was talking about how we try to be part of a group. And I didn't know if you have ideas or reflection on, like, how do you figure out who your group is if you have so many different, I guess I go to post sometimes, and it's like, I sometimes even find it hard to post anything. So it's like, I'm aware that I have all these different audiences. Yeah. Which one am I targeting?
Yeah, I have the same problem. I don't know that I have any answers, but I certainly have people who I went to high school with who I definitely don't share their political views. And it's stressful just to read all of it. I mean, like Tim said, sometimes you just mute them. And for myself, I've made the commitment not to completely unfriend people who I disagree with, because I want to make an intentional commitment to, not having such a bubble or echo chamber. But, so people who know me, I have a chronic illness that makes it difficult for me to get out a lot sometimes. That's why I teach from home. And so social media has a different place in my life. It's sort of a bigger place in my life than other people who do actually see people all the time, face to face. And especially with the pandemic, that's sort of happened with everybody. So I sort of made the commitment to keep people in there who aren't in the same bubble that I'm in, so that I'm reminded that not everybody agrees. But that can be really stressful. I mean, especially things that I find really problematic, that I do just find straight racist, for example. It can be really problematic, and it can cause me a lot of emotional stress in trying to decide how to respond. So I'm basically voicing solidarity. I'm not sure I have answers. I think you have to make the decisions for yourself about that, about, like, I think you have to remember, I think the most important thing to remember is that it is Facebook, and it's not really your life, right? Like, you can remember that there are these bubbles in Facebook, and they're not how people always are. If you sort of remember what they are, it's easier to deal with them. I don't know. Tim, do you have any words of wisdom about that?
You know, I feel your pain on that one, because you're right. You can post something and then, you know, Facebook just stresses me out. There's been times where I've tried to, you know, pose some thoughtful questions and establish some ground rules and say, look, let's talk. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this matter, but I'm going to squelch any side conversations or anything that ventures off topic. And I'll just delete. You're going to be deleted if you don't follow my rules on this post, you know. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. But I also feel like I've got enough to do without monitoring all that.
Yeah.
You know, but I would say the other side is because social media, Google, these sorts of things give us what we interact with. We need to be intentional about interacting with things that are different. Yeah. Otherwise, so if I don't like Rachel's posts when she posts, you know, a family picture or whatever it is, I will stop seeing her on Facebook if I don't engage her enough. Well, if I only engage conservative or liberal or cat videos, you know, that's what I'll start getting back. And so I use Twitter for news. And so I've intentionally, you know, sort of my spectrum is NPR to National Review on the political spectrum. But I have to remember to engage them. Otherwise they won't show up as much.
Yeah. So
you have to be intentional with that. So it's just a little bit past 8. Let me share the screen one more time to show you something, an option that we have to call your attention to. There it is. Let me see. Now let me go and get it. So this is our website. This is Oak Grove's website. This is not the home page. This is the page for this event. And over here on the right are the resources that I talked about earlier. The purple, these are all hyperlinks. So there's articles. This TED Talk on Rachel that you sent on filter bubbles. Lynette's not showing up on Lynette's real well. Can you see that? Is this page showing up on
screen right now?
Black screen. Okay, well.
Black screen.
All right.
There's a gray line in the middle of it.
Okay, sorry about that. Go to our oakgrovecob.org and let me see here.
The TED Talk that I referenced is the Dan Ariely. It's the one about where I talked about the analogy with optical illusions. That's Dan Ariely.
Okay.
How we really make decisions, I think, is the name of it.
So if you're interested in learning more, just check those things on our website. So next week, our presenters will be 2 members of the Oak Grove congregation, Jim Shaver and Mike Hanger, both of whom have long and very successful careers working for Channel 7 here in Roanoke. So in media, Mike is now also currently the communications director for the city of Salem. And so they will give us an insight more into media, how the 24-hour news cycle, how cable news, how internet news, basically anybody with a smartphone and a website can report news, and how that has impacted the news media that we consume. And so they're both great guys, and we'll have great fun with them. And those of you who know Jim Shaver, if you know, it is so fun to you ask him one question about the media and prepare to be engaged for 45 minutes. It's just wonderful. So I hope the same Zoom link will work next week. So save the Zoom link. I set this up to be active again next Thursday night at 7. And if you want to unmute and say goodbye, we'd be glad for you to do that.
Thank you.
Rachel.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Rachel. It's good to see you. Hi, Lynette. It's good to see you too. Yeah.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.
All right. Well, cool, Rachel. Well, thank you so much. I think that was.
I hope it was helpful.
Yeah, this was a new video. Yeah, everybody else, you're welcome to stay on and listen in. You know, Buddy and Linda and Martha.
Yeah.
No, this is well, we would do this kind of thing on a Wednesday night. We have speakers in from time to time. So having a speaker in on a topic is not new. Just this Zoom format is, and advertising it a little more widely
Yeah.
was new to us. So
Yeah.
So cool. Well, so you probably have a bedtime to get to. I'm wondering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's going to bed. He might already be going to bed. My husband might have already been.
Oh, okay. Well, I hope you'll be able to join us next week as well.
Yeah,
I told folks at church that I would love to see the graduate course that the three of you could teach together.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff.
Yeah. So.
All right. Well, thanks for inviting me.
You're welcome. I appreciate it so much.
Yeah.
All right, Buddy and Linda and Martha, we'll see you all later.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.